but I'm an actor and a filmmaker and a comedian, and I know how to make content and tell stories visually. And I said, that's where I feel like because everyone's bringing their expertise to Bitcoin. It's such a fascinating community. It's such a fascinating network, or whatever you want to call it. And so seeing how we're using it to fix elections in Guatemala, and the whole Bitcoin's bad for the environment. Nope, we're proving that, all those things are being debunked. So how do we tell the stories that get people to go, oh, and I feel like this is what, not only is this documentary I'm trying to raise money for, but I want to do like scripted long form content that has Bitcoin messaging in it. Because I think that is, and as a comedian, I know that if we don't agree on something, if I got you laughing, you're going to maybe listen to what I'm saying. Yeah. If we're arguing, you're going to get defensive and say, the hell with you. But if I got you laughing, you're like, I see your point. I see your point.
Graham, we finally got in the studio together.
Yeah, we made it happen, man. It's great to be back down here.
I was thinking about today, and I realized the first time you reached out to me about you wanted to do a video, I think, kind of a teaser, because you had this project plan for El Salvador, and you're like, hey, this is Graham. I'm doing this movie thing, and we're working with another Graham on the Dare to Dream movie, and so I'm horrible with names. I'm super disorganized. So I totally thought you were that Graham. So you showed up to my house, and it's like, I don't know who this guy is. What is going on here? So I played it off because I'm lost half the time anyways. But it was today that I finally realized, I'm like, that's why I was confused. They both have the same name.
It's the rarest of things to have two Grahams in any space, let alone two Graham filmmakers who are into Bitcoin.
And you guys were just on the same panel together,
We're on the
right?
same panel at the Adopting Bitcoin. It was a Bitcoin film fest. And literally, like, the panelists were like, well, they'd ask a question, we each go down the line, and one guy kept saying, well, the two Grahams, I agree with what they're saying. So we became, and I said, we should start our own, the Grahams of Bitcoin filmmaking group with the two of us.
Yeah, they got to be careful, 2 Grahams in Hollywood, and they might think you're talking about something else.
Yeah, the DEA might be going to kick my door in.
So how did you come to Bitcoin through, I understand, right? Your film is your background, and that you've been in that industry.
Yeah. So I've been a filmmaker and a stand-up comic for a long time, and I've done a lot of TV shows. I've directed 3 feature documentaries. I directed a TV series that's on Amazon Prime right now. It's like a Native American stand-up series. And
well, you got to throw the name out. You can't just tease it. So you got to shill it a little here.
First Nations comedy experience.
Okay.
And then I have 2 of my 3 movies are on Amazon as well. Earbuds, the podcasting documentary, and Lafghanistan, which is comedy downrange. Those are, Lafghanistan is, I entertained the military in Afghanistan and made a documentary about it. And Earbuds, I've made with my former podcast co-host, Chris Mancini, and we were also co-creators of the Los Angeles Podcast Festival along with Dave Anthony. And so we showed the connection between podcasters and fans and how different it is, and how is this new emerging space and way to create. And a lot of us entertainers in show business were loving the fact that we didn't have to deal with these middlemen. We could just make something and send it right to the audience and find an audience. And so we showed that connection. We interviewed
When was that was released?
We released that we shot it in 2014.
So that was still pretty early days
in
the podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we interviewed like Chris Hardwick and Mark Maron and Joe Rogan and Aisha Tyler. And we interviewed fans in Australia and Japan. And it was really cool. And the early days of podcasting, this very much feels like, Bitcoin feels like that. It feels like podcasting 12 years ago, when I was at Pacific Beach in last month, where I ran into you.
Pacific Bitcoin,
right? Sorry. Pacific Bitcoin that Swan puts on. I was like, wow, it has that same energy of like, we're all on something new. We're all on the cutting edge of something. And to me, the Bitcoin space is even more exciting in that it can change the world, in any number of ways. So I was a filmmaker, and I hosted game shows, and I gone to war zones and all this stuff. And also, I say this, I lost my home to foreclosure in 2010 as part of the housing crisis. And I went through a 16-month battle. And
in California?
Yeah. And I saw both parties. I saw Bush and Obama give the banks whatever, $700-800 billion each, to the tune of roughly $1.5 trillion. 6 million foreclosures still happened. Nobody's home was saved, including mine. And I saw how they scammed me. They, it was 2008, the recession hit. We had just had there was the writer's strike of 2008, which hurt the entertainment industry. And then we go into the recession, and I had this, beautiful condo 4 blocks from the beach in Santa Monica that I, bought a little small house with my game show money that appreciated. I got the condo. I was doing everything you're supposed to do, to upward mobility at the American dream. And then all the money, the housing crash hit, and I had really good credit, but I was paying my mortgage a little later in the month, each month, and I was struggling to get work, and a lot of work got locked out because of the recession and the writer's strike of 2008. And Indy Mac owned my mortgage, and they said, Bush had just put a bunch of stimulus into play. And they said, if you wait till you're over 30 days behind on your mortgage, we have all these programs to help you. And I said, okay. So I was more than 30. So I was like, I know I'm going to take a ding on my credit, but all right. And they said, we're going to put you on a forbearance. We're going to cut your mortgage payment in half. And for 3 months, and at the end of this 3 months, we're going to restructure your loan. I said, awesome. And I even moved out. I was newly married. We moved out, rented out the place, got a little cheap apartment. So I was like, this is great. And I was trusting my government was going to handle this. And then after the 3 months, they said, oh, you don't qualify. Oh, and guess what? You're 3 months behind now because you've been making half payments. I grew up in Chicago, Michael. That's a mob trick. You know what I'm saying? This is how the mob gets you. And then Obama gets sworn in, and I voted for Obama. I thought, he was going to be Mr. Hope and Change. And same thing, Obama's got a better stimulus. I go, he'll be better than those crooked Bush and those guys. Same thing happened. Put me on a forbearance, cut me in half for 3 months. And then they said, oh, you don't qualify again. So now I've got 6 months. Now, and I couldn't get a straight answer. I'd get a statement in the mail saying you owe 11 grand. I'd go on the website, it'd say 10 grand. I'd call someone on the phone and say it's 12 grand. And I was like in a panic. So I hire lawyers, and they say, stop making payments. Once you get near foreclosure, they don't want they want to keep you in your home. And I was like, okay, what do I know? Yeah. We're not taught financial education in America by design. So then I end up losing my home.
So do you know, was the market value of your home worth more than you owed on it at that time, or were you underwater on it?
It was worth more. It was still worth more. Okay. I bought the condo for about $550,000. It had gotten up to about $900,000. The crash brought it down to $7,000. And I probably owed about $5 or $6 on it at that time.
Yeah. See, that's the problem. The people that were way underwater, the banks were happy to keep them going. But the ones where there was still positive equity in it, they would string you along and try to take it, because then they can sell it for, they can take it back, and they have an immediate profit. And so it's
that's what I learned.
That's the problem. That you either want to own your home free and clear, or you want to have it maxed out that the bank doesn't want to touch it. So you want one of those others. Those people that were like you, that were still in the positive, that were trying to do everything they said, those were the people they just
because I had a friend of mine who was underwater. Yeah. He was in a neighborhood in LA that got way overvalued, and they reconstructed his loan. I was by the beach, so they're like, well, we can make money here. And I found this out later. One West Bank bought a bunch of mortgages for about 30 to 40 cents on the dollar. So then they had all this equity when they bought my mortgage for pennies on the dollar. And they did this with stimulus money. And I was like furious. And I was like, I'm done. I'm done with these.
It's kind of like everything else. It's like the most irresponsible people are bailed out. The people that are trying to do it by the book, they're the ones that get screwed.
Yeah. It's really like I should have just run it up and gotten 15 HELOCs and I should have just like...
No, honestly. And because I remember studying a bunch at that time, and it was definitely, you either wanted to own it free and clear or have it be underwater. What you don't want is there to be a bunch of equity in there, because then the bank is incentivized to take it from you.
And that's what they did.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was my retirement. That was a lot of... That home now is probably worth 1.3 to 1.5-ish.
Yeah.
And so I was just really frustrated and distraught, and, you know, was a road comic and didn't really know how to talk about it. And then after the 2016 election, I was like, I was a Bernie supporter. I saw the Democratic Party cheat him. And then I saw Hillary run a horrible campaign. I voted third party because I'm not voting for her or Trump. No way. I'm not voting for the lesser of two oligarchs. And, I then said, you know, I'm going to start doing a YouTube channel and really start paying attention. So I started doing political vigilante. And my slogan is follow the money, connect the dots, get the truth. And I started to see, you know, here's the reason we don't have free healthcare in America. The healthcare industry donates to both parties. Like the reason, you know, it's the war machine. And I started finding stuff like opensecrets.org, which is a great website if you want to know what politicians are getting money from where. It's a nonpartisan, non-for-profit, because the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, any donation 2,000 and up has to be declared. So you can look in there, you know, and see Bernie Sanders got $800,000 from the defense industry in 2020. Donald Trump got 2.7 million. Joe Biden got 3.1 million. Whoever was in the White House, we were going to have war.
Yep.
So as I was learning about how, wow, and it's all a scam. Red, they want us fighting, red, blue, whatever. It's all a scam. It's professional wrestling. You know, one party might get a little more money from one lobby group, but overall, it's a scam. And I started learning about the central banks and how corrupt they are and the IMF and all this. And I started watching RT. And I was on the show Crosstalk a lot with Peter Lavelle. They'd have like a Republican, a Democrat, and then me. And I'd usually argue more with the Democrats because that party has so sold us all out. I mean, I'm sort of like, both parties are awful. And I started watching Max Keiser. I watched all these shows on RT America. And I started watching Max Keiser and I was like, oh man, he's really...
And when was that? What year was that?
2018.
Okay.
You know? And I was starting to fear, I've heard about this Bitcoin thing. I don't know. 2019, this platform called Rockfin, which is
At that time, was Keiser's show just Bitcoin, or was that just a component of it?
It was a component of it. He was really calling out financing and then would always kind of sprinkle in like, buy Bitcoin. He'd be like the central banks and he'd call people kleptocrats. And I was like, wow, yeah, America is a kleptocracy run by oligarchs. It is not a representative democracy. And, you know, I was really like, yeah, and the IMF and the banking is part of the war machine. It's part of creating poverty. And I was like, wow, and I, you know, because I lost my home, was so like banging the drum on that. And, you know, and then I'm watching Obama drop more bombs than Bush. And I'm seeing all of this war. And as a comedian that went to war zones, I saw it up front, Michael. I saw economic conscription. I'd meet because I went to Afghanistan 3 times and Iraq 3 times and Kuwait. I went 7 comedy tours in war zones from 04, 06, 07, 08, and 2011. And so I'm talking to guys and my third and fourth, fifth times down there or over there, guys are 28 going, this is my third deployment. Why are you here? It was a $20,000 reenlistment bonus. And I'd get the same story. I'm from fill in the blank, small town America. There's no jobs. There's Walmart flipping burgers, selling Oxy, or the Army. And I was like, I saw the whole system, man. I saw it all. I was like, wow. And so when I started hearing Bitcoin, I was like, what is this Bitcoin thing? And then it was so this company Rockfin is a YouTube competitor, and they said, put your content on here. It's blockchain, and we pay you in our token. At that time, I didn't know the difference between crypto and Bitcoin, like a lot of people. So they were paying me in their Ray token. They showed me how to set up some wallet, and I was like, yeah, whatever. Okay, yeah, sure thing, man. You're paying me in unicorn tears or something like that. I'm like, this is whatever. And their token was trading at about 17, 18 cents in April of 2019 when I joined them. And then January of 2020, a buddy of mine that was also on their platform goes, have you checked the price of Ray? And I go, oh, it's like 90 cents. And I was like, well, this is real money. So I was like, I got to figure this out. Then the shutdown happened. I lost, all my tour dates as a comedian, which was about 40% of my revenue. My YouTube show was starting to do all right. So I was like, I better figure this out. And then I really started to I understood Bitcoin and, converting my, shit coins, we can say it on the show, I'm sure, to Bitcoin, seeing Bitcoin go 8, 9, 10, 12,000 in that summer. And I converted some I got some at like 8 or 9. It jumped to 12, and I paid off a credit card, like my last one. And I was like, okay, I'm really getting into this now. And I started buying Bitcoin, and I still was buying Ethereum and some of that stuff. And then I had Max on my show a year later.
So when was that?
April of 21, April or May.
Okay.
Max,
so I know we have, we found an article, I think from 2020, if Andy can put that up, that for some reason they were interviewing you about your $1,400 stimulus payment. Yep, there we go, back there.
Yeah. And
so you haven't aged too much. I mean, you still look pretty good there.
Thank you.
That was, I think we looked up before the show. So Bitcoin was trading at, I think, what did we say, 8,000 or 6,000?
6,600, somewhere in there.
So at that time, you were able to buy like 0.22 Bitcoin, which if you held it, would be like 8,000 today, 600% gain.
And
you still have that.
Yeah, so, I've been stacking.
So the government gave you $8,000, really.
They took my $1 million home, but at least I got $8,000 in Bitcoin.
It was like a parting gift.
It was like, now get the F out.
But losing your home, that was kind of like an education process too for Bitcoin cycles, to make sure you don't leverage your Bitcoin, because that's basically what happened. You were leveraged in housing. They forced you out at the bottom, and then when the market runs back up, you see that. And we've seen people do that with their Bitcoin when they try to borrow against it, and or try to leverage it and go 3 times, and then they wind up getting pushed out. So maybe in the long run, the government helped you learn at an early age.
I think, I learned a lot, and I learned a lot. And one of the things I learned is I don't think I will ever leverage my Bitcoin unless it gets to 10 million a coin. I'll do 5 to 10% loan to value, maybe. But
sometimes it makes sense to borrow against the spend, because then you don't have the tax implications.
Sure.
But you have to be very careful, because a lot of people think that they're doing what's smart, and then they get liquidated, and they owe taxes on top of it when they get liquidated. So you definitely, at 5 to 10%, I think you'll be okay. But beyond that,
I wouldn't go beyond 10%.
Yeah.
So Max came on my show, and he really kind of showed me the difference between crypto and Bitcoin. And then I've started to become more of just a Bitcoin master.
So how did you connect him? You just reached out to him and said, hey, come on my show?
I reached out to him, and I said, because, I've been on all of these other RT shows. So he probably kind of knew me, or could at least ask, who is this guy, Graham? And so he was like, yeah, absolutely. And him and Stacy came on the show, and they were awesome, and just followed him and kept in touch. And so I started paying attention to what Bukele did. It was about a month or two after they came on is when Bukele announced Bitcoin legal tender. And then he implemented it in September of 21. And then when he locked up all the criminals last year, I was like, whoa. And I've slowly, I don't talk exclusively Bitcoin on my YouTube show or my podcast, but I weave it into a lot of things. And I've been telling my audience, I go, this is how you get out of the central banks. And I started telling them the altcoins are like stocks. Maybe you can make money. You can make money in the stock market, but I go, Bitcoin is digital gold. and they can't mess with it. There's no FBI. They're CEO of Bitcoin is not getting arrested. they're not taking the servers out of Bitcoin HQ or whatever. So it's cool. And then when I, saw this spring, all of a sudden is like, oh, El Salvador is the safest country in Latin America. I was like, I got to come down here. And I talked with Sandy Waves. I met her. She's a tour guide.
Yeah, we've had her on the show.
She's
Sandy's
awesome.
Great.
She's awesome.
For anybody looking to come down here and wanting somebody to set up everything, she's the person to contact. Go back and find the podcast we did. You can find all her contact info. But she's Bitcoin only. She does not accept fiat. Because I was kind of curious. I was like, wow, she's like, no, it's a great screening tool because Bitcoiners are just better to work with. So she's like, I don't want to work with anybody else.
I know. I was telling my friends back in the States, I'm like, she's basically a Bitcoin tour guide. Because not only is everything you paying in Bitcoin, she introduced me to.
She knows everybody in the ecosystem here. So
it's like,
yeah,
it was so cool. And I think she turned me on to you. And I just started learning about Bitcoin Beach. I reached out to you coming down here. And I had dinner with Max and Stacy.
And you fooled me into thinking you're somebody else. So I said, yeah, come on over.
I said, this guy thinks all grams are the same. So this will be an easy trick. And then I was like, I'd love to make a documentary about what's happening here. And that project has sort of expanded. I think now I want it to be a doc series because it's so changing with who knows what's going to happen with Argentina and Bitcoin. Yeah. And, there's I forget her name, and the Wyoming senator who was introducing Lummis. Introducing a Bitcoin bank and
Caitlin Long is the one doing the bank.
Yeah. And RFK Jr. and DeSantis, I don't know if either one of those guys are going to get the nomination, but they're pro Bitcoin, and so it means it will be in the conversation. It is going to be in the.
I think RFK is running third party.
He's running third party now.
So I'm sure he'll get that nomination. Whether I would say it's impossible for a third party to come in, but we've seen what Bukele did here. So, everything's possible these days.
Anything's possible in America. Yeah. American politics is insane. So I think regardless of who gets what nomination, it's going to be, as we get more into 24's election cycle, it's going to be a part of the conversation. Yeah. And as America is literally doing everything it possibly can to be a collapsing empire. Like they wake up in the morning and go, what would a collapsing empire do today?
Well, that was Bukele's theory when he went on Fox News. He basically said, like, this can't be an accident. Somebody's actively trying to destroy America because the crazy things they're doing. Like they must realize the outcome of these things. So they know the outcome of these things and it's deliberate, or they're so drunk with power they just are like, no, they're so arrogant. I'm still in the camp that they're just that stupid. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's becoming harder and harder not to be a conspiracy theorist because it's like there's no other explanation for a lot of the things they do. So I find myself being drugged in that that direction, kicking and screaming. So it's,
Either way, it's not good. Whether they're just complete morons or this is some sort of horrible, evil plan. It's like either way, it's going to be bad. It's another reason I tell people to just start buying some Bitcoin. And I think too, the conference has been so cool, meeting all these different people from different walks of life. I'm seeing there's so education and adoption is like the big hurdle, right?
Yeah.
And how do we do that? is the big question that and there's a million ways to do it because everybody gets sort of orange pilled differently. And I think I heard some great things at the, Corey Klepston does a swan salon in LA every month. And the last one, he was talking about that. And I think the key is rather than do the thing, which we've all done, which is you got to buy Bitcoin, you got to buy, just go crazy on them, is to ask them. So, and find what do you not like about it, and find the thing that their misconceptions. Yeah. Like let's say you come across a guy like me that doesn't know about it. Well, the bank stole my home. Both parties are corrupt, so Bitcoin's going to be part of that whole. And that's when you go, oh, okay. And then you would walk a guy what I went through. Somebody like me. This is actually why Bitcoin was created. And I think this conference was really cool, and it's a lot of tech people, a lot of finance people. And I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of these Bitcoin miners from Germany and and tech and finance people. And I go, I'm not a tech guy, not a finance guy, but I'm an actor and a filmmaker and a comedian. And I know how to make content and tell stories visually. And I said, that's where I feel like because everyone's bringing their expertise to Bitcoin. It's such a fascinating community. It's such a fascinating network, or whatever you want to call it. And so seeing how we're using it to fix elections in Guatemala, and the whole Bitcoin's bad for the environment. Nope, we're proving that, all those things are being debunked. So how do we tell the stories that get people to go, oh, and I feel like this is what, not only is this documentary I'm trying to raise money for, but I want to do like scripted long form content that has Bitcoin messaging in it. Because I think that is, and as a comedian, I know that if we don't agree on something, if I got you laughing, you're going to maybe listen to what I'm saying. Yeah. If we're arguing, you're going to get defensive and say, the hell with you. But if I got you laughing, you're like, I see your point. I see your point. So that to me is what's sort of exciting that I pulled out of the conference. And, and the thing about the Bitcoin, everyone's different political, social views, but everyone's like, cool. Nobody jumps down your throat. Like in America, you can't have a conversation about anything without it turning into a fight or a cancel or a this or a that. And so,
well, I want to circle back to that later and talk about cancel culture and comedy, but I don't want to get you off track from. I really want to know what the vision is for this documentary or the documentary series. How do you see it being laid out? What do you think will be different about what you're looking to do versus what's already out there?
I think, seeing some of on the film festival and just knowing some of the doc series that are out there, what was the one you talked about with the other grant?
Dare to Dream.
Dare to Dream. And seeing some clips from that, I'm like, wow. I think there's great stories being told out there. And I think there's room for all of it because, the majority of people probably still think that they got to have $36,000 to buy Bitcoin. Yeah. I mean,
no, there's definitely not too much Bitcoin content out there. Yeah. We need creators, and that really is how you get into really the normie community, because they want to hear the story, they want to understand it, and film just gets that across so much better. If it's just written form, it seems too technical to them. It's harder to tell life stories, but when you can do it in film, then they get it. So I think there's a huge need for it, but what I've seen is there's a bunch of content being produced right now, but it's not being distributed beyond the Bitcoin space. So it's kind of like we're preaching to the choir. So how do we get beyond Twitter and Bitcoiners for them to see this footage?
That's a great question. And so I've had, meetings with a lot of different people. I just had a meeting with a pretty big production company that they've done docs, they've done scripted, they've done Oscar-winning movies, scripted, and I had a pitch with them about this being a doc series. And I said,
and what does that mean? Like half-hour episodes that are every week?
Five, if you look at some of the doc series on Netflix, where there's like 4 or 5 episodes because the subject matter warrants more than just a 90-minute feature film, right? So I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, but some of those about like some of the cults and stuff like that, it's like so, and I go, the more I investigated, what's going on with the world and seeing the Bitcoin community and all of the different issues, so this is more than just a 90-minute movie. This has got to be 5, I'm thinking 5. And so you can really focus on, first of all, the history and what Bitcoin is, but I would explain it in a very sort of simple, funny way. Like I use the example of The Big Short, right? Which is not a documentary, but it has kind of a doc feel to it about the housing crisis.
Which they did a great job of taking a very bland financial issue and putting a human face and story to it.
Like you could sit there and explain to me fractional banking till the cows come home. I'm not probably going to get it. But then they were like, we're in a casino in Vegas. There's an economist and Selena Gomez. And I went, oh, all right. It's a bunch of people just gambling on betting. And I was like, all right.
No, they did a great job with that. I love their little takeaways of, different cameo appearances by people.
And the fun, there's some serious heavy material in there, but then they would do the talk right to the camera. And I think that's what I would do first to explain what Bitcoin is and then debunk all of these, Liz Warren saying it's bad, it's corruptible, whatever, all those things, and present them in a way that's, again, not for us. We don't need to preach to the choir. I don't need the Bitcoin community. The Bitcoin community is going to like this no matter what.
Yeah.
But how do I communicate to all my friends that don't get it? And then show all of these things, how it's helping, like the circular economies that you guys are creating with Bitcoin Beach, and all the Bitcoin bubbles that are popping up, and all of the talk about, because I think most people don't understand that, roughly 2.5 billion people don't have access to traditional banking.
Or why they don't. Because it's not a solvable problem, because it's uneconomic to bank them.
Right. Yeah.
But people don't understand why that is. They don't understand the way that KYC AML policies have basically excluded half the world from the financial system. So these things, they all just think like, oh, well, why, banks will eventually bank them, but they won't.
And when you explain that to people in first world countries, they're going to go, oh, and you hear, again, this is what a doc series does. You sit someone down who tells their story. I couldn't send money back to Nigeria, to El Salvador, whatever, because of these fees, and you explain that. And then all the things you just said, you explain that in the documentary. People go, oh my, I didn't know that. Those are the best documentaries.
Yeah.
Is when it's about a subject that I didn't know that much about, or a subculture, whatever. And then I walk away going, dude, I had no idea. I mean, one of them, to bring it kind of full circle, there was a doc that came out in 2010, 2011 called The Inside Job, narrated by Matt Damon, about the housing crisis. And I didn't even understand. I was about 6 months, I had just lost my home about 6 months prior, and it was, a 2-year battle. And I was still sort of in shell shock about how did this happen? Yeah. And they explain that, Goldman Sachs has been in every presidential cabinet since Reagan. And I was like, oh, this is how corrupted this is. And so that's what this doc series is going to explain on the and explain that stuff in simple and comedic terms, and also go into the personal story and interview the people whose lives have been changed. And so El Salvador, like my slogan is Bitcoin saves El Salvador, can it save the world? El Salvador is just going to be sort of here's the use case. Because obviously the goal is not everybody move to El Salvador. The goal is to get everyone to do what El Salvador did, right? So, and how this can benefit you, and I think the personal stories, like I'd like to, what Miss Bitcoin is doing, she's educating kids in El Salvador. That is a compelling story in and of itself. She was Miss El Salvador and now calls herself Miss Bitcoin and feels like she has this mission. And that's what so many Bitcoiners have. They feel like a mission. And so many people, she could just make a fine living being a model and an actress. She's a beautiful woman. She's very smart, but she's like, no, I need to do more. I met so many people at the conference. I came from the finance world. I could do another startup and make another $1 million, but I want to do more. And that is what the message is going to be of my doc series, to really get the home viewer that doesn't know much about Bitcoin by the end of the series to go, you know what, I'm going to learn. I got to learn more about this. And I want to help. I want to do something more. I think and just in the United States, there is just a undercurrent, or maybe even just a full current of frustration with the whole system. Everyone agrees the political system in America is broken.
Yeah.
We can disagree how to fix it, but
we could literally have an election. This is my scenario, this next election. Trump's going to be in jail. Biden's going to had a stroke and he's going to be on life support. And
that they're going to still...
And one of them's still going to win, probably. Maybe then RFK has a chance, but it's going to be... I mean, there is a literally good odds we have a scenario like that where one of those two... where our president's either in jail or in the hospital on life support, brain dead, and they're the president. So
I wouldn't be surprised. It's a guy in prison and a guy on life support running head to head. And the thing is, the thing that whoever wins, the other side is going to claim they cheated.
Oh yeah, 100%. We know that for sure. That's 100%
because that just happened the last two elections. Yeah. Whoever wins, the other one says they cheated.
Yeah.
So that's
it's going to be close and it's going to be ugly. And I'm going to be glad that I'm in El Salvador and not in the U.S.
I will not be in the United States in November of 2024. That is a promise to myself.
I think if you, just as a precautionary thing, I would recommend all Americans just not be around. I mean, if you want to vote ahead of time, vote remotely. But yeah, I think it could get very ugly.
I'm always registered to vote by mail because I travel so much. Yeah. And mine will be in the ballot as I'm driving to LAX in October. That'll go in the mail, ding, and I'll be out. Yeah. So that's my vision, is to actually and show how unified Bitcoiners are. Because I think there's a longing to be unified in America, but we're deliberately divided. They want us fighting with each other on every dumb thing, so we don't go, oh, there's a handful of rich assholes ruining everything. That's what it's always about. Divide and conquer. If there's only 1,000 people in power and they know that 100,000 people could show up outside of their door and it's over. And they've all, I'm assuming, read history books, because that's what always happens. The wealthy people get taken out. Their own security details turn on them because the security goes, I'm not fighting 50,000 people with guns outside of this castle or mansion or whatever. I mean, I heard one activist talk about, he said, the Hamptons is not a defensible position. So, and there was a poll in The Hill that came out recently that they said if it is Biden versus Trump again, 60% of the people said they're going to vote third party. Everyone's done with all this old zombies. I mean, The Onion, I think, just put out a joke about they're going to try to pass term limits so Dianne Feinstein can still be in office even though she's dead. Mitch McConnell doesn't know where he is. Biden doesn't know where he is. I mean, I question Trump's mental acuity as well. These people are all 1,000 years old.
I don't know. Trump's not my favorite. I'm not a Trump fan, but man, that guy still seems to. I wish I had his vigor. He still seems to have some fire in him. So.
He does. He's got fire, but I don't. And the younger, the Gen Z is just like, what? What are these? Yeah. What is going on? So. I don't know. It's an interesting time. And the place that I see the most hope is in El Salvador and with Bitcoiners.
Well, in El Salvador, I mean, I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but Bukele winning was the equivalent of a third party coming in and taking it. I mean, they basically had the Arena Party and the FMLN, and that was like the Republicans and the Democrats. It always went back and forth between those two. And so even when people were starting to say, Bukele's going to win, I thought, there's no way. Like, this is a two-party system like the U.S. It's rigged. The political parties have all the power. There's no way. And I was 100% wrong. I mean, he just crushed them that first year. And so it's shown that it could be done. So maybe we're to that point in the U.S. where people are fed up enough that a third-party candidate can actually have a chance.
I just talked to a friend of mine that my friend... JB Updike, that runs Open Primaries, which is a non-for-profit that gets independents into the primaries, right? Like California, independents can register and vote, but a lot of states don't have that. And independents are literally not allowed to vote. And so he's a big, advocate for independence. And he goes, I think this election, I was like kind of dark. I was like, that's going to be nuts. It's like, whatever. It's going to be Trump in prison and Biden, on a respirator. And he goes, I don't know, man. He goes, because America is so fed up, he goes, there could be this interesting thing where somebody like Dr. Cornel West is running as an independent. He goes, he could team up with like RFK and America could go, yes, we're voting for you guys because we're just so done with this crap that I don't know. I don't want to be too optimistic about America, but I am like, anything can happen. And it's something, let me put it this way, like you said about El Salvador, El Salvador was ready for this, for Bukele and a third party to come in here. And I think America is ready for just like somebody outside of this horrible, it's just somebody come in and do some decisive stuff that can help the citizens. Neither of these parties in America care about the citizens at all. They care about their donors and getting reelected. Like neither party cares at all. And the American way of life keeps getting worse and worse. And so you're right. It could be some exciting, and maybe I'm hoping Bitcoin will be right in the thick of it.
So what needs to happen for this docuseries to get made? I don't know anything about the finances required or how those things are funded, and if they're commercially viable, or if there's something that need to be more crowdfunded. What is there's a
lot of ways. So we just put it up on Keiser.fund, and you can support the movie. We just put it up there. So there's no contributors yet. So you could be the first. I would love to see the Bitcoin community like help fund this movie.
But do you envision that more as like individuals kind of grassroots funding, or Bitcoin companies coming along and saying, hey, or both?
It could be both. I think ultimately, and I'd love it if we did it grassroots. That's a long campaign. And I feel like, we'll be able to tell Bitcoin stories forever, but I feel like there's an opportunity right now with the halving coming up in April to have a Bitcoin doc series come out like next summer or fall. Because we know the 12 months after the halving, it's going to be pumping.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to be asking questions. And I think and that's how I pitched it to this company in Hollywood. They could just, I'm speaking to them next week, and they could come back and say, yeah, here's the money, let's go. That's obviously the ideal, because then it's like, we're in
Then
place.
you can just do it.
We can just do it. Because the crowdfunding way, I've done docs crowdfunding, and that's great, but it's a lot of work, and it's really cool and rewarding in some ways. But then it's also we got just enough money to shoot this much of it, and then we need to get more, and it's you're this constant fundraising.
It's definitely not as efficient way of shooting it, because you're, stop, go, stop, hurry up and wait.
And with a doc series, you want to be shooting and editing at the same time, and that takes money.
Yeah,
that takes real money. So
what would you need somebody to come through to fund something like this, like ballpark? I have no idea if this is like 10,000 or 10 million. I mean, where are we in that spectrum?
You're looking at, to do a doc, a 5-episode series, you're probably somewhere between 500,000 to $1 million per episode.
So maybe 2 Bitcoin by the end of the next.
That would be, if Bitcoin just goes nuts, someone could just go, that would be awesome. If Bitcoin just runs to 500,000 or 600,000 in the next 12, 18 months, and somebody goes, all right, here's 2 Bitcoin, go make your movies. So
if anybody listening out there, if you want to be part of history and help make this thing happen, make sure you reach out to the Graham and
reach out, because I'd love to. And also, if there's any big Bitcoiners or Bitcoin companies, I think there's an opportunity to do like not just a series, but a long-term relationship of more Bitcoin content to get the message out, which helps everybody. And look, the movie will have you and big people in it, like Max and Stacy have agreed to be in it, and they could probably get Bukele in this documentary, and all these other interesting people that I'm lining up and who are coming on board with it, personalities and individual people. And so it's a thing you could really be a part of. You're on the ground floor of something, and, like we were all sort of aware of, Bitcoin is in its infancy. I think it's like the Model T. When they made the Model T, they didn't envision a Tesla or a Ford F-150 all electric, or a Formula One race car. The Wright brothers were not thinking about the space shuttle when they were, fumbling around in a field. So, we're at the early stages of this, and it could be really cool. And so I'd love for anybody listening to this that's in the Bitcoin community, reach out to me. You can, put your name all over it. You want to be anonymous, you can do that. And look, if a Hollywood company wants to give me the money to do this, great. If I had to choose, I would love it if the Bitcoin community did this.
Then you have a lot more freedom, artistically in how you structure it. It was funny. We had a couple years ago, somebody reached out to me. They wanted to buy the option to do the Bitcoin Beach story. And then, we talked, and I think it would be great, at some point if they do a feature film about what happened. But I joked with them. I'm like, my only request is you get somebody good looking to play me. And then at the end, I get to come out and I say, and this is the part of the movie where the real person comes out and you're very disappointed about how average and normal looking they are. Like, that's one line I want in it.
Yeah, that's great. Just get like Liam Hemsworth to play you or something like that. That'd be awesome.
Because you know how that is in those movies? They always take the person, you're like, that was a stretch casting that.
Yeah, they just got some A-list guy, put a wig on him or whatever.
So I want to circle back to, at the end, we'll make sure people have all your contact info so they can follow up and make this happen. But I am curious, you mentioned at the beginning that you're a traditional lefty. So I joke,
not a liberal.
Yeah, so that's like a lefty from like 20 years ago, but when they still believed in free speech. But how is it being a comedian in this day of cancel culture where like,
oh, it's brutal.
Everything is off limits, it seems like.
Honestly, Michael, it feels like when I first started doing stand-up in the early 90s, when the whole politically correct thing was going on and everyone was getting offended about all this. And this is
But that was not nearly as bad as it is now, right?
Because there wasn't social media.
Yeah.
Where you can just gang up on somebody. And it's like everything in America. America only knows how to go from one insane extreme to the next. And this, I believe, is by design to keep us all fighting with each other. So we're fighting about cancel culture and you said this or said that rather than, hey, there's billionaires who were all flying on Epstein's jet. None of those people have been prosecuted. Anyway, but
well, we don't even know who they are yet.
Yeah, we don't even know. Ghislaine Maxwell, she just operated alone and trafficked a bunch of kids into an empty field. And Epstein hung himself with a paper t-shirt. Okay, case closed. So let's get mad at what a comedian said. That to me is part of what the cancel culture is. It is the hysteria du jour to keep everyone distracted from what's really going on. As a comedian, the freedom of speech thing it's so frustrating. And again, to watch, like, I'm not a liberal. I do not associate with them and I do not like the Democratic Party in any way, shape, or form. So I call myself an anti-war pro-labor socialist, which is, again, what a lefty used to be. And I'm freedom of speech. So the cancel thing, I get, like, now with social media, if someone's out there being really awful or racist or threatening someone in public and there's a video of them and it's like, all right, let's hold this person accountable. All right, that is fine. But now a comedian makes a joke, so you want to protest. Like the Dave Chappelle thing, and they were protesting him just because he was making jokes about and talking about, transgender, and he's not allowed to make that joke. This is what drives me nuts. And they're protesting outside of Netflix to take his job away. As a comedian, I really like Dave Chappelle. I don't know him personally. Some of that special, I was like, I don't think these are all home runs.
Yeah,
But don't watch it. How hard is that? Like, and people say, well, what about Alex Jones? I go, Alex Jones is such a great example of first of all, most Americans don't even understand what protected speech is and is not. Alex Jones has every right. I think Alex Jones is nuts. I don't watch his stuff. I don't care what he has to say. He has every right to say lizard, alien people, the earth is flat, whatever. Everyone in Hollywood's drinking virgin's blood or whatever crazy stuff he's saying. He has every right to do that. He has a right to say the mass shootings are faked. He has a right to say that. Here's where he broke the law. When he said, go after the parents, okay? That's not protected speech. People need not, like, I can say, Michael, I hope you die. That's protected. If I say, I'm going to kill you, I have now broken the law. I'm threatening you. So Alex Jones broke the law, and that's when he landed himself in court. He perjured himself in court as well, which you can't do. So, okay, he should, and I always say, don't listen. If you don't like this podcast, just shut it off. Like, what do you got to complain? And the problem I have with the woke thing, dude, I'm a crazy lefty. I'm a social, you know what I mean? Like, I want free healthcare, free college. I'm that guy, right? And America has the money to do it because we print as much money we can. If we can afford these wars, we can afford free healthcare, right? So, but freedom of speech, man, you have to be able, freedom of speech, and this is the problem Americans have now, is people think, now the woke thing is, I don't like what you have to say, so I want to silence you, and that's not freedom of speech.
No. Well, they don't even pretend to value freedom of speech anymore. It used to be, they're like, well, that's not, we're pro freedom of speech, but now they're like, no, free speech is harmful. It's dangerous. I've always been, more on the conservative,
Sure.
libertarian side. But the freedom of speech issue is one where I always thought the left had it right. And
Right?
then all of a sudden they went the other direction. I was like, what in the world?
Now they're against freedom of speech. They're in favor of wars, I guess now. The Democratic Party is like more war. It's crazy. And part of this is just whatever one side is in favor of, the other side will just disagree with. So if one side is literally like, we have the cure for cancer, the other side's going to go, no, it's awful. We need more cancer or whatever. Like that's how crazy America is. But the freedom of speech thing, I'm like, this is, again, if someone is saying, let's go kill this group of people, okay, that's bad and harmful. That's, again, advocating violence against a group. But but that's different than, I don't like that group.
Yeah.
You can say that person's offensive. I don't like them. They're whatever.
But now we can't even bring up practical things.
No.
Like, hey, I don't think somebody that's born male should be competing with females. It is harmful to female athletes. Oh, you're transphobic. It's like, no, this is just a rational thing that 95% of the people agree with, but would never say because they're afraid of being canceled.
It's funny. This is a great example. At this Bitcoin conference, we were at one of the meetups. I'm talking to this woman and she's like, and it was so cool. She was kind of new. Her friend is sort of orange pilled her and brought her down. She's like, man, this Bitcoin thing's really cool. And she's like, Graham, I'm a gay black woman and this is crazy. She goes, science is science. There's male chromosome and female chromosome. She goes, I'm a gay black woman. And if I said that, I'd be called transphobic. And I'm like, yeah, and the sports thing is just, and this is the other thing. My dad was a college professor, so he was a history buff. So I like history is where we can find answers. It isn't crazy to say, male, born a male who transitioned to female shouldn't be competing because it's not fair. Look at Wilt Chamberlain changed the rules of the NBA because he was so tall and dominant. They made a rule, the 3-second rule, because he would just sit under the basket and boom, boom. So they was like, well, that's not fair. We got to make it a little more. So instead of this fighting and yelling and saying, oh, you're transphobic, just go, okay. The men that have transitioned to women, they compete in their own category. Yeah. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. I mean, I don't know why that's so crazy.
But that's what blows me away. You're like, this is just it's not even like a moral issue. It's just a rational issue. Like, can we just have a rational conversation about the outcomes of these things? But it's gotten so far off. I was, they had a parents' weekend at my daughter's in university first year and they had, she's in this honors program called the Augustinian program. And they do a lot of just dialogue and talking. And one of the parents asked, what do you see different in students these days or changes? And this college professor said, the kids are afraid to say anything these days. He's like, it used to be in college that you had these battle of ideologies and everybody kind of brings what they're thinking and you kind of hash it out. He's like, now nobody will say anything because they're afraid they're going to get canceled. So you try to engage them and everybody's like,
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
Because someone's going to whip their phone out. And it's really if we are supposed to be a democracy, part of a democracy is healthy debate. We should be able to have a debate where we don't insult each other and call each other names. And go, I have a really good friend of mine who's very much more conservative. I would call him a Reagan Republican. And we have these discussions. I have a friend of mine that's an ex-cop. And, we've had debates, but
it's healthy.
We should.
Yeah.
And we always walk away going, man, you have a great point. I don't know if I agree with it, but I see where you're coming from. Cool. And we're still friends and we laugh and joke, they call me.
And even when you don't agree, it helps you at least realize, it's not because they're stupid or immoral. They just see this a little bit differently.
They see it different than me. Yeah. And then you go, maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe I could at least, I get that, I get your point of view. And when you shut everything down with and then everyone's calling everybody else a Nazi. Everyone's a Nazi now? It's insane. And it's again, it's just rational. Again, my dad.
So how do you deal with that as a comedian? Do you just
oh my god?
And I missed your show during the Bitcoin conference. I was so wiped out by that point.
Right.
I'm an introvert really, and so those conferences they just drain. I love it. I love all the interacting with people, but it drains me. So I missed your show. So I've never actually seen you perform. So I'm just curious, do you just stay away from controversial things? Do you lean into them, or what? How do you exist as a comedian in this day and age?
You know, my special that dropped in March on All Things Comedy, which is Bill Burr's platform, it's called Manifest It. And I really try to focus on calling out the broken two-party system. And I talk a little bit about just my own personal and, you know, where I came from, you know, how I was, you know, my dad was a college professor and took me to Dachau when I was 6. That's why that I have such a dark view of the world. And so as a comedian, I really try to go step back and go, here's why the whole thing is nuts. And here's why the whole thing is broken. But there are certain subjects, it's just like, I unfortunately, I've self-censored more. And it's unfortunate because it's you see what happened to Dave Chappelle and you're like, come on, like, really? And I could even, you know, I personally wish Chappelle would talk more about the wealth inequities and the ruling elites and the, you know, the billionaires that are ruining the planet. But he should be allowed, and in his talking about it, he's very thoughtful. And he talked about, you know, the transgender comic that defended him who got, you know, completely crushed on Twitter. And he's like, so it's not, unfortunately, Michael, I have, and most comics are just like, I'm not going to talk about that.
It's just not worth it.
It's not worth it. It's not worth it. So it's what George Carlin, who was a hero of mine, he always said, punch up, you know? So I'm going after the people in power. And if, you know, people want to flip out and, you know, and I've had people flip out against me and I've had that, you know, and it's like, it's not fun.
Yeah.
It's not fun. I've had constant attacks and stuff like that online over certain subject matters, and it's not fun, man. And it's like, it makes you go, oh, the comedian in me. And I'm Gen X. So Gen X is a little more like, man, shut up.
Yeah.
Like we don't, you know, that's our generation. It's like, cause that's how we were raised. A parent, any adult could go, hey, what are you doing here? You know, I'm calling your mom, or I'm going to, you know, like adults could just scream at a kid who was acting out of line. And now it's like, so it is, it's tougher. It's just tougher.
It's funny. My wife and I have talked about how, I mean, we Gen X also, and we've raised our kids the way we were raised. But we're always, I think people think we're totally irresponsible parents because now, you know, everything's coddled. You got to protect them from everything. I'm just like, I feel like you guys are harming your kids, but we're the ones that always look out of sync. It's a different world trying to raise kids in that environment.
I've seen kids now that are 20, 21, 22 who were raised in that coddled environment. And some of them, they don't know how to function. The thing I love about Gen Z, I have 6 nieces and nephews. I don't have any kids of my own that are all Gen Z, right? Ages like 14 to 23 and 24. So they kind of run the spectrum of it. I love how open they are. Like, again, going back to the gender thing, call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. Identify with whatever you want to identify, but then don't denounce science, you know? And I love how inclusive they are. There's less judgment on everything, which is wonderful. But then I'm like, man, they are soft because they can't handle somebody criticizing or disagreeing with them. You know, maybe for me, it was a little too much. I mean, I played high school football where I had some like Korean war vet just going, Elwood, you idiot. What, you know, like, so, but they do seem a little like soft.
Yeah.
If I had kids of my own, I wouldn't be as mean. I wouldn't let the kids, I mean, I was under supervised. I think Gen X, we were a little under supervised. I would try to find that balance of like supervising them a little, but also at the end of the day, you got to figure this out. Yeah. You're going to wipe out on your bike. You know, it's going to happen. Like someone's not going to like you. You might have to be in a fight. Like, you know, you better figure out, because when you get as an adult, That's the other thing. I've seen these kids in their late 20s and stuff, and they're calling mommy and daddy when there's a problem. I'm like, whoa. I had a kid who worked for me on one of my films, and he screwed up, and he gave a rough cut of our movie out when we told him not to. He signed an agreement, and he went against his contract, and he had his dad call me, and I was like, if I would have called my dad and said, Dad, I got fired, he would have been like, why? Why did you screw up?
Yeah.
Go get another job then. Or try to talk your way back into the job you fucked up on. He wouldn't be like, let me call your boss. I mean, if I called my dad would have been like, what the hell are you doing? Like,
I mean, I had that as, we have a food service business in the US, and you'll have like parents show up and try to fill out their applications form. You're like, your kid's 20 years old. Are we hiring you or the kid? Or then they'll call and say like, hey, my son needs off these days. I'm like, I didn't hire you. We hired your kid. If they want to come, we'll see if we can approve it. But they made a commitment. But it's bizarre. It's like,
wow.
It is very bizarre.
And it feels like it's another insane thing of America.
Yeah. well, I don't want to get started down this rabbit trail because I'll lose my composure. But how was it performing there at the conference with Max Keiser? Was that the first time you had performed with him?
It's the first time I performed with him. It was really cool. I saw him at Pacific Bitcoin, and we hung out there and just were making each other laugh. And I was like, I know he doesn't really do stand-up, but he started as a comic. And I was like, hanging out with him, I was like, oh, he's a comic. And it's in his genes, man. I go, because we riffed and hung out the way I would any of my pro stand-up comic friends. So I was like, hey man, come and just do a little time on the show. So he gave like a Bitcoin talk that had some jokes in it, which was very funny. Read some stuff from his book. Has a great joke in his book about Rachel Maddow. I love that joke. And it was really cool. And then I think his name is Giacomo or whatever.
Uh-huh.
He did a couple of minutes, which was cool. And then I just loved it because I did some just sort of newer material that I just sort of wrote during the conference about Bitcoin and being as a comic, when you do a room full of people that are all like on the same whatever page, it's so fun. And it's a blast because you can just like make these.
What's going to hit.
It's going to hit. I can make these jokes. I can't do a lot of Bitcoin jokes in regular clubs, So that was fun. And then I did some stuff from my act, and even in there, as I was doing the bit, I was like, oh, I can add a little Bitcoin like tag to it, which was so cool. And people were like, thanks, man. It was really just a different something, because the panels are great and really informative, but I'm sure 2 straight days of talking about nodes and the IMF or whatever, it's like people are like, I could use a little, and so it was really fun. And it was really cool because I really want to be plugged into this world and this community, because I'm so inspired by what everybody is doing. Sure, I'd like to make some money. I hope Bitcoin goes to 1 million. Yeah, we all do, but I don't want to just do that.
Yeah.
And to see how everybody here, like what you guys are doing and Hope House and everyone like wants solutions, is looking for. It's so fascinating what I'm seeing and the people I'm meeting. So I was so happy to be a part of it. And like, I was the only comic here.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'll be the Bitcoin comic.
No, I can't wait till they get that out because usually they'll release the different sessions,
right,
the next couple months as they go through. So I'll make sure and tweet that out. But I am curious to watch Max, because it's funny, the first Bitcoin conference that I went to, Max was the second speaker. At first, it was Andreas. I can never pronounce his name right. Antonopoulos. Antonopoulos, yes. And I had never seen him before. And then he was in rare form. It was La BitConf in Uruguay, and he was just going off and dropping F-bombs. And I was like, oh, what is this? And then Max came up next, and Max like kicks a chair across the stage, and he's like, And that's just not my style at all. I'm more of like an academic. And so I was like, these people are nuts. It was, yeah, for me, it was very like, I was kind of shaken. And so I had this one, kind of view of Max from that. And then through what's happened in El Salvador, I've just realized, he is sharp as can be. He is a marketing genius.
Yes.
He's done more for like Bitcoin adoption, but he does it in a playful way that I think a lot of people miss but it's not an accident. Like he knows how to work people. He knows how to get the message out, and he understands Bitcoin. So you put all those things together, and it's this like magical combination that I didn't appreciate at all the first time that I met him. So
all of those things, plus his like really in-depth knowledge of just finance and the banking system.
Yeah, all that background that he had before that. And when you sit down and talk to him, you just realize he really gets it. Like he is sharp as can be. Obviously he has a show persona but underneath that is just a brilliant mind. So that's what's so great to see all that come together.
That's what's like, draw me to him. And I think, we've sort of, in our conversations and hanging out, they weave back and forth between like talking serious stuff, but then also just riffing and joking. Like I was like, wow, these are my favorite types of people, are like really smart and knowledgeable, but then also just super playful. Like he's a showman. He's a showman at heart.
He is an amazing showman.
He's a great showman, and he talks and he's a comic. I was like, if he didn't have such a gifted brain for finance, he would have just stayed in the clubs. Oh, yeah. Which you made the right choice, Max. You made the right choice. Trust me, but it's really cool. And it's part of the uniqueness of this conference and the Bitcoin space and what's happening. What him and Stacy are a part of and doing in El Salvador is like.
Well, the role Stacy's played here, people do not understand how much work she does and how important it is, and the amount of scams and shitcoiners she's kept out of the country, the way she's kept things on course. I really think if they weren't down here, we might be in a different place. She especially, I think it's underappreciated how many hours she puts into that. Yeah,
she is, really working hard to see what they're doing. And you're right. I think if they weren't here, this might have become a shitcoin paradise or something scammy. It would, and then which would fuel the like, oh, Bitcoin's a scam narrative, because they would have said, oh, see, it failed in El Salvador, and because they've helped keep them out and keep it.
Yeah, and I was kind of skeptical when they first came down. I was like, you got these personalities coming in, and what, but I just saw like, no, they're doing the work, they're making things happen, and. So very grateful, because I would not want to have to do that. It's not the fun work. They're doing the hard work. So
no, it is a lot of heavy lifting, but it's the kind of stuff that, I'm sure 5-10 years from now, it'll see.
Oh, they're leaving a legacy here for sure.
Yeah. I
think their work here will, in the history books, will be the most important of their careers. So
for sure.
I think it's, I'm happy they're here.
Yeah.
Happy they're doing that job.
I like getting to know them more and hanging out more with them. And it's been a blast. And doing the show with Max was a blast.
So I don't want to keep you much more, because it's a beautiful day out there, and maybe get one more surf session.
I got one in at least. So
we've got the 5 o'clock meetup tonight. So you got a couple hours to rest up before that, but I want to make sure, is there anything else that we needed to cover that we didn't?
No, this is great. Just go to grahamelwood.com.
Yeah. We'll make sure and give you all the.
We got one more question.
One more question. Okay.
The question is
from Andy. Andy's joining in.
This is a comedy question. The question is, in Seinfeld, right? Let's imagine we run Seinfeld and we write one script, one episode, and we include Bitcoin. Who on the show will be the Bitcoin haver? How does the show run? Go ahead.
Well, obviously it would be Kramer would be the first guy to get into Bitcoin. He would be like, so the episode would open with him opening the door. Jerry, I found Bitcoin, digital gold. He'd do all that. And I think the episode would be Jerry would be like, oh, so skeptical at the beginning. This is so ridiculous. And then he would see Bitcoin go from whatever it went from.
Kramer's heating the hot tub in his room with his mining rig.
With his mining rig.
Right?
That's that. There it is. And he's like, wait, what? Right. And then it starts going up.
Yeah, Jerry, you gotta get this. You gotta get this.
Yeah. And then he would start seeing the price, and then, Kramer would be really rich, and Jerry would be like, how did Kramer get ahead of this?
Yeah. And then he's out. I'm out. Kramer's out. And everyone's like, what? Yeah.
And then, Jerry would probably they would show him like on a TV show or something, talking to someone, and then like a smart financial advisor type would tell Jerry about, Bitcoin's really smart. And he's like, wow, maybe Kramer isn't nuts, and then he would the episode would literally be called Orange Pill, would be the name of the episode.
Absolutely.
And by the end of it, Jerry would be a full Bitcoiner, and they would end the episode with him doing what's the deal with fiat money? Like, he would be doing something like that.
Yes. Include Bitcoin in several sitcom shows, run those shows as is. That's a great way to reach many folks. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah. And, I should talk about this. So December 7th, we're doing our Anything Can Happen game show. It's a political game show. We started doing it during the pandemic, where we make fun of the whole political system. We read, one of the question categories is who said this, Democrat or Republican? And we read some awful quote, and you have to figure out who said it. And oftentimes it's not who you think it will be. So that's in Hollywood, December 7th. You can come, there's tickets for that, but we will also be live streaming it. So it'll be 7 o'clock.
So if people want tickets, where do they go?
They go to GrahamElwood.com. It's on my appearances at GrahamElwood.com.
Okay. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Too.
And at GrahamElwood.com is all my social media, my podcasts, everything. I'm at Graham Elwood on all social media.
Okay.
So
what about on Twitter? Same
thing, at Graham Elwood. So that's where you can find me. And I'm definitely talking more Bitcoin stuff than I have in the past. So
sweet. And for somebody who's got some Bitcoin that they've been looking to change the world with, I think this docu-series needs to happen. So definitely reach out to him. And also for companies out there, it's perfect timing. I mean, you want to be in that pole position in the next bull market and have those shows released right when people are interested. So they could be the ones with their name on it.
There you go.
So. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming down. It's been fun to riff on these things, and hopefully we can circle back in another 6-12 months, and we'll have started shooting. And we'll give people an update.
Awesome, great to be back. Thanks.